Today I'm going to run through 7 lesser known pieces of pension knowledge that could really help a lot of you out. I want to keep this video to the point and with as much value as possible, so let's dive straight into it with number 1, and that is tax relief. Now I'm not talking about being tax efficient here. I'm talking about claiming tax relief that you may think you're getting but may not be. And this one is huge. An average of 80% of high rate taxpayers eligible to claim tax relief through their self-assessment tax return failed to do so between 2016 and 2019. This is just not acceptable. I can almost guarantee that some of you watching this now will fall into the statistic. And to be clear, this is not your fault. The information we receive, be that through our workplace pension provider or the government, is absolutely horrendous. I mean, clearly it is. Why else would 80% of the people eligible for tax relief not be claiming it? So let me just explain what's going on with this. If you're contributing to a SIPP, for example, you're probably aware that you get 20% tax relief at source, and then you have to fill out a self-assessment to claim back your higher or additional rate relief on your pension contributions. But if you're contributing towards a workplace pension, people tend to be under the impression that all of the relief is achieved at source, basic rate and higher/additional. But unfortunately, this is not necessarily the case. I believe the driver of this is how your payroll or accounting department recognize the relief. Some will be under what is known as a net pay arrangement and some relief at source. But this doesn't matter. Please just go to your HR, payroll, accounting, whatever department and confirm with them if you are getting full relief from your pension contributions or if you need to fill out a self-assessment form for higher and additional rate relief. If you've missed out on this, you can claim up to 4 years of backdated relief that you were owed. So I would get on this ASAP. This can obviously be a huge difference in how much you end up with in your pension pot. I've left an article below that may give you a bit more background on this, and feel free to share it with your HR department and friends who may have the same issue to get some brownie points on this. Okay, number 2 is drawdown timing. When you hit the required age where you can start withdrawing from your personal pension, as many of you I'm sure will be aware, there's a rule in place where you can withdraw 25% of the pension pot tax-free up to a maximum amount of £268,275. This is obviously great, but approaching this haphazardly and pulling out the maximum amount you can from your pot oftentimes is not the best way to approach this. Let's be clear, there is nothing necessarily wrong with taking the full 25% lump sum all at once. It's your money that's been locked away for years and you've earned it. But the rationale for not doing so is quite simply that letting your money sit and grow within the tax wrapper of a pension account will be impacted significantly if you suddenly remove, say, 200 grand from the pot. Not only will your pension pot then have less capital sitting within it which would previously generate returns, but stunting the growth on this also means that you wouldn't be able to get the maximum bang for your buck from the 25% tax-free drawdown. And what I mean by this is your 25% lump sum is not locked into whatever your pot's original value is when you first start withdrawing. This 25% tax-free amount applies continuously to drawdowns up until the aforementioned limit. So continuing to grow your overall pension pot means continuing to grow your tax-free lump sum potential. Number 3 is one I bet not many of you have heard of, and that is the pension advice allowance. The pension advice allowance lets you take £500 from your pension pot, tax-free, and without incurring any withdrawal penalties, to put towards the cost of financial services and advice. You can take this £500 out once a year for 3 years, and while it's nothing super significant, doing this really could be a great move for many of you just to make sure that you're getting a good level of assurance as to where you are with retirement planning and what improvements could be made. The return on investment of sinking 500 quid into this could potentially be huge, but just double check with your pension provider to see if they allow this. I believe the majority of them still do. Number 4 is accessing your pension too early. Look, this is obviously a controversial one, and just know that I'm coming at this from the perspective of trying to maximize the value of your pension pot. You should absolutely use your money when you want to, but this is something to consider. So the point here is that just because you can access your pension from age 55, it does not necessarily mean you should. A saver taking their 25% lump sum, for example, from a £400,000 pot will miss out on £24,618 worth of investment returns over just 5 years. Resisting the urge to tap into your pot and leaving it untouched for as long as possible will give your money more time to benefit from tax-free growth and compounded interest, as mentioned earlier. Another point here is that if possible, you should avoid raiding your pension to cover costs in later life. The reason being is, unlike other parts of your estate, pensions can be passed on free from inheritance tax. So if your boiler breaks, for example, it would be better to take your money from your savings than your pension. Number 5 is not saving enough, and it is boring and painful to hear this, I understand, but it is true nonetheless. Many of us are not saving enough for retirement. Thanks to auto-enrollment, over 20 million employees now participate in workplace pension schemes, which is an improvement compared to before the rules kicked in. However, a large number pay only the bare minimum into the scheme. Under auto-enrollment law, your employer must ensure your minimum pension contributions at 8%, but this does not mean that you yourself are contributing 8%. Usually a split of 3% from them and 5% from you is what is in place. Like I said, while this is better than nothing, it is unlikely to be enough to build up enough of a comfortable retirement pot. This, of course, is assuming that, there aren't hugely significant contributions being put into other investments such as an ISA, property, etc. According to data from the Department of Work and Pensions, around 54% of workers save less than 6.5% of their earnings into their pension. The government have understandably come under pressure to increase auto-enrollment contributions or increase the scope to include younger workers below the age of 22 to ensure more people have decent retirement income when it actually comes to retirement. But I get it. If you're contributing what you feel you can, then that's great. And one thing I would say is to just really shoot for maximizing pension contributions that your employer will top up. Get that employer match maxed out, and this boost can make an absolutely huge difference, especially if you've got lots of time to leave that amount invested into your pension pot to compound. And if you're in your 50s and 60s, yes, that applies to you as well, which brings us nicely onto point number 6. And that is neglecting investing once you've hit or are approaching retirement age. Look, I'm not going to go into excruciating detail with this one. I'll do it justice with its own separate video because I think it's such an important subject. But the previous point surrounding time that your money has left to grow within your pension pot is what inspired this point. I think a lot of people hit 55 and assume their accumulation stage of retirement planning is over. But the reality is, and I know this is a really weird concept to internalize, you're really just getting started. Assuming you live to 85, you've got 30 years to make this money last. That's the scary part. The good part is that you have 30 years to let this most likely big chunk of money generate returns for you to live off. So when the conversation of things like return on equities can fluctuate for those in their 30s with little impact, but not for me, I'm approaching retirement, that's just not true. Assuming you don't need immediate access to all of your funds, which of course would be a whole different issue in of itself, if you have 30 years to generate returns from your capital, treat it this way. You don't necessarily need to be invested entirely in bonds just because you hit 55 years old and you anticipate drawing down some funds from your pension. And this is of course where financial planning comes into things. And yes, your appetite for risk should and will most likely decrease because, like I said, you will be drawing down from this amount at some point in the near future. But the point remains, your money can and should stay invested even when you're in retirement, so approach it in that way. And number 7 is the underuse of tax allowances when formulating your overall retirement income strategy. It may sound ridiculous, but there is a very real chance that you can put together a healthy retirement income, I'm talking 40 to 50k per person in your household, and pay absolutely no tax at all. And that's without taking huge tax-free lump sums or relying on ISA withdrawals. If you want more detail on this, I've put together a video giving you everything you need to know here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.